high above the shimmering skyline of Los Angeles, in a penthouse that symbolized wealth and success, a dangerous secret threatened to unravel everything. Ethan Caldwell, a charismatic millionaire husband and respected tech entrepreneur, had always been the picture of devotion to his wife, Olivia. With her kind smile and unwavering support, she had been his rock as he built his empire. Now pregnant with their first child, she had every reason to believe their life together was unshakable. But while Olivia was away, seeking rest and medical care in a wellness retreat in Aspen, a woman with relentless ambition saw an opening. Vanessa Hart, a striking and cunning branding consultant, knew exactly how to slip into Ethan's world with the promise of passion and excitement. She understood men like him, powerful, driven, and always craving the next thrill. She had no intention of playing fair. Olivia had grown up in the quiet suburbs of Seattle, raised by parents who believed in love built on trust and loyalty. She had always dreamed of creating a home filled with warmth, something she never found in fleeting college romances. When she met Ethan, a rising star in Silicon Valley known for revolutionizing smart home technology, his confidence and charm made her believe she had finally found the stability she longed for. Their wedding was nothing short of a modern fairy tale, attended by CEOs, celebrities, and political figures, but Olivia cherished the simpler moments. Movie nights on their oversized couch, Ethan's playful kisses before heading to work, and finally, the incredible moment she found out she was expecting. She envisioned a future where their child would be raised in love, surrounded by the warmth she had always dreamed of. But early in her pregnancy, mild complications arose, and her doctor recommended a peaceful, stress-free environment for her second trimester. Leaving Los Angeles behind, Olivia flew to Aspen, staying with an old friend, Clara Whitman, a holistic wellness expert with a private retreat nestled in the mountains. It was only meant to be a short trip, just enough time to regain her strength and prepare for motherhood. She had no idea that in her absence, Vanessa was already setting her plan in motion, ready to turn Ethan's loneliness into an opportunity. As Olivia's plane soared into the night sky, leaving behind the city lights of Los Angeles, Ethan stood in the terminal watching until she disappeared from view. He had reassured her with warm words and a steady gaze, promising to join her in Aspen as soon as his schedule allowed. But deep inside, a strange weight settled in his chest. He should have felt relief. Less pressure, fewer responsibilities at home. Yet, instead of enjoying a quiet evening, Ethan found himself feeling oddly restless. His pregnant wife had always been the steady force in his life, the voice grounding him amidst the chaos of running Caldwell Tech. But now, without her presence filling their penthouse, the silence felt almost unnatural. By the time he got home, exhaustion tugged at his limbs, but sleep eluded him. He fixed himself a drink. One glass of bourbon turned into 2, then 3. Work was relentless. His high-powered executive role at Caldwell Tech demanded constant attention, and the upcoming government contract negotiations only heightened his stress. He thought about calling Olivia, but what would he even say? "I miss you already," sounded weak, even if it was true. Instead, he stared at the city skyline, his mind wandering in directions he knew it shouldn't. Then, the doorbell rang. Frowning, Ethan checked the time, nearly midnight. His first instinct was that it might be his assistant, Jordan, dropping off urgent documents. But when he glanced at the security camera, his pulse skipped. Standing at the entrance, her auburn hair gleaming under the dim hallway light, was Vanessa Hart. He hesitated before unlocking the door. When he finally opened it, she stepped in with effortless confidence, shrugging off her coat to reveal a sleek black dress that clung to her figure. Her sharp, knowing eyes took in the penthouse with quiet appreciation before settling on him. "I hope I'm not intruding," Vanessa said, her tone smooth as silk. "I had some last-minute ideas for the branding campaign and figured you wouldn't mind a little brainstorming session." Ethan knew better than to let his guard down. Vanessa was ambitious, talented, and dangerously perceptive. She thrived on pushing limits. Still, he told himself this was harmless. It was just business. But as Vanessa stepped closer, her perfume lingering in the air, something unspoken crackled between them. A silent challenge, an invitation wrapped in feigned professionalism. And despite the warning screaming in the back of his mind, Ethan found himself unable to step away. Ethan hesitated before unlocking the door. He already knew who it was, but seeing Vanessa Hart standing there in the dim hallway sent an uneasy jolt through his chest. She carried herself with a deliberate grace, auburn hair gleaming under the soft glow of the penthouse lights. She wore a tailored coat over a black dress, the sharp contrast against her fair skin making her look effortlessly striking. "Hope I'm not disturbing you," she said, offering a polished smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I figured you'd be up, considering the contract deadline. I had some last-minute branding ideas that might give you an edge, and I thought, why wait?" Ethan could have told her to come back during office hours, but something in her unwavering confidence stalled him. As a successful entrepreneur, he had met plenty of people who pushed boundaries, but Vanessa did it in a way that felt like an unspoken challenge. He stepped aside, allowing her in. Vanessa moved through the penthouse like she belonged there, slipping off her coat and draping it over a chair before placing a sleek folder onto the marble kitchen island. "The city deal is a game changer, and I don't want your company's brand to feel outdated. These ideas," she tapped the folder, "are bold. You might love them or hate them, but they'll make an impact." Ethan poured himself another drink, his mind still clouded from earlier. He wasn't sure if it was the whiskey or the weight of Olivia's absence pressing on him, but he found himself listening a little too intently, his focus drifting from the words to the way Vanessa leaned in just enough to blur the lines between business and something more. "You don't waste time," he said, smirking despite himself. "Time is the one thing we can't get back," she replied smoothly. "I believe in seizing the right moments." Her gaze lingered just a second too long, an unspoken invitation woven between the words. Ethan recognized the shift, the way harmless conversation took on an edge of something dangerous. He knew what this was. He was a millionaire husband, alone in a penthouse that suddenly felt too quiet, facing a woman who knew exactly how to play with temptation. He should have sent her away. He should have told her that business was business and nothing more. But instead, he let the moment stretch. Too long, too risky. And Vanessa, sensing the hesitation, stepped just a little closer. From an early age, Vanessa understood that ambition and persistence could unlock doors that wealth alone could not. By her early 30s, she had carved out a reputation as one of the most sought-after consultants, advising tech moguls and Fortune 500 companies. But her real talent wasn't just business. It was reading people, understanding their weaknesses, and knowing exactly how to step into the spaces they left unguarded. That night, in Ethan Caldwell's penthouse, she sensed an opening. The unspoken void left by his pregnant wife's absence lingered in the air, an opportunity she had no intention of letting slip away. Their conversation began with strategy, brand positioning, market influence, and the subtle nuances of public perception. But as the night deepened, so did the familiarity between them. She laughed at his insights, lightly touching his arm when she made a point. It was a fleeting touch, innocent enough to dismiss, yet deliberate enough to make him notice. Ethan wasn't naive. He saw what she was doing. And yet, he didn't stop it. They moved from the kitchen island to the plush couch in the living room, where Vanessa praised his vision, admiring not just his achievements but the way his penthouse reflected a man of depth and refinement. She spoke of ambition, of legacy, of the kind of influence only a powerful businessman could command. And as she spoke, Ethan found himself relaxing, the city lights casting a warm glow over their conversation, her voice a quiet melody against the backdrop of the night. The clock struck 1 before either of them noticed. Vanessa glanced at her watch and gave a small, knowing smile. "I've kept you too long," she murmured, rising with an air of effortless grace. "We can continue tomorrow, or whenever you're free. Let's finalize a plan to get your brand exactly where it needs to be." Ethan walked her to the elevator, his pulse unsteady from the mix of whiskey and the quiet thrill that lingered in the room. As the doors slid closed, Vanessa gave him one last look, her lips curving into a slow, knowing smile. "I'll be in touch," she promised. "There's so much more we can do together." As Ethan stood alone in the silence of his penthouse, guilt and intrigue tangled in his chest. He told himself this was business, nothing more. Yet he couldn't deny how easily Vanessa had quieted a loneliness he hadn't even admitted to himself. By morning, reality struck hard. A dull headache and an uneasy weight settled over him. He resolved to be cautious, to keep things professional. He was a millionaire husband, a soon-to-be father. There was too much at stake, but Vanessa had no intention of letting him pull away so easily. 2 days later, she was in his office, this time suggesting lunch. Vanessa was patient, methodical. She never rushed. She let moments build, layer by layer. A casual conversation here, a knowing glance there. It was how she worked, how she got people to lower their guard without ever realizing it. 2 days after their late-night meeting, she arrived at Caldwell's office, effortlessly charming his assistant, Jordan. "I'd prefer a private lunch," she said with a warm, disarming smile. "Creative discussions flow better outside the office, don't you think?" Jordan hesitated for a moment before relaying the message. And to Ethan's surprise, he agreed. Maybe it was because of how persuasive she had been the last time they talked, or maybe it was because he was starting to enjoy the intrigue of their exchanges more than he should. At an upscale restaurant overlooking downtown Los Angeles, Vanessa presented her ideas over a beautifully curated lunch. Her pitch was flawless, her confidence unwavering. But it wasn't just the campaign she was selling, it was the experience of working with her, the unspoken promise that she understood him in ways others didn't. She listened, truly listened, as he spoke about the pressure of running Caldwell Tech, the constant expectations, and the weight of being a successful CEO in an industry that never slowed down. "You're always carrying so much," she murmured, her eyes locked onto his. "But have you ever stopped to think about what you want, not just for the company but for yourself?" Ethan tensed. He shouldn't be here, discussing personal matters with her. He had a wife, a pregnant wife, who was waiting for him, trusting him. And yet with every moment that passed, the lines he had drawn were becoming harder to see. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Aspen, Olivia tried to ignore the unease creeping into her thoughts. Mornings were filled with yoga sessions, afternoon walks with Clara, and routine checkups at the clinic. The fresh mountain air was supposed to bring her peace. But something felt off. She called Ethan regularly, hoping to feel connected despite the distance. At first he had been warm, eager to share updates and tell her he missed her. But recently something had changed. His responses were shorter, more distracted. Calls were rushed. Texts went unanswered for hours. "You seem worried?" Clara observed one evening, handing Olivia a cup of herbal tea. "He's just busy," Olivia said, forcing a smile. "This contract he's working on is huge. When he's in work mode, everything else fades into the background." Clara studied her carefully. Being busy is one thing, being distant is another. Trust your instincts. Olivia wanted to believe everything was fine, but deep down, she knew something wasn't right. Vanessa was patient, methodical. She never rushed. She let moments build, layer by layer. A casual conversation here, a knowing glance there. It was how she worked, how she got people to lower their guard without ever realizing it. 2 days after their late-night meeting, she arrived at Caldwell's office, effortlessly charming his assistant, Jordan. "I'd prefer a private lunch," she said with a warm, disarming smile. "Creative discussions flow better outside the office, don't you think?" Jordan hesitated for a moment before relaying the message, and to Ethan's surprise, he agreed. Maybe it was because of how persuasive she had been the last time they talked, or maybe it was because he was starting to enjoy the intrigue of their exchanges more than he should. At an upscale restaurant overlooking downtown Los Angeles, Vanessa presented her ideas over a beautifully curated lunch. Her pitch was flawless, her confidence unwavering. But it wasn't just the campaign she was selling, it was the experience of working with her, the unspoken promise that she understood him in ways others didn't. She listened, truly listened, as he spoke about the pressure of running Caldwell Tech, the constant expectations, and the weight of being a successful CEO in an industry that never slowed down. "You're always carrying so much," she murmured, her eyes locked onto his. "But have you ever stopped to think about what you want, not just for the company, but for yourself?" Ethan tensed. He shouldn't be here, discussing personal matters with her. He had a wife, a pregnant wife, who was waiting for him, trusting him. And yet, with every moment that passed, the lines he had drawn were becoming harder to see. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Aspen, Olivia tried to ignore the unease creeping into her thoughts. Mornings were filled with yoga sessions, afternoon walks with Clara, and routine checkups at the clinic. The fresh mountain air was supposed to bring her peace, but something felt off. She called Ethan regularly, hoping to feel connected despite the distance. At first he had been warm, eager to share updates and tell her he missed her. But recently something had changed. His responses were shorter, more distracted. Calls were rushed. Texts went unanswered for hours. "You seem worried," Clara observed one evening, handing Olivia a cup of herbal tea. "He's just busy," Olivia said, forcing a smile. "This contract he's working on is huge. When he's in work mode, everything else fades into the background." Clara studied her carefully. Being busy is one thing. Being distant is another. Trust your instincts. Olivia wanted to believe everything was fine, but deep down she knew something wasn't right. Ethan had convinced himself that he had everything under control. Vanessa was just a business associate, an asset to the company. If she was around more often, it was because she was delivering results. That's what he told himself. But not everyone was convinced. His assistant Jordan had seen enough to feel uneasy. After a staff meeting, he lingered behind, lowering his voice. "Mr. Caldwell," he said carefully, "is everything all right at home?" Ethan frowned. "Why are you asking?" Jordan hesitated before speaking again. "Vanessa's been around a lot lately, and sometimes it doesn't seem strictly about business. I'm just looking out for you." A flash of irritation sparked in Ethan's chest, followed quickly by guilt. He forced a tight smile. "I appreciate your concern, but it's fine. She's important to the brand strategy right now." Jordan nodded, but didn't look convinced. "Just be careful, sir." That evening, Ethan planned to go straight home. He'd ignored Olivia's unease for too long, and he needed to be the husband she deserved. But as he stepped into the lobby, Vanessa was waiting, her smile both effortless and knowing. "I had some last-minute ideas," she said smoothly. "I thought maybe we could go over them over dinner." He hesitated. Jordan's warning rang in his ears. Then Olivia's voice, soft and uncertain, echoed in his mind. But Vanessa's gaze held him in place. He told himself it was just business. That's how it had started anyway. An hour later, they were seated in an intimate Japanese restaurant. The dim lighting and secluded alcove made the setting feel more personal than professional. Vanessa slid her tablet across the table, her presentation flawless as always. But as the meal progressed, the conversation drifted, away from corporate strategies and into something more personal. She spoke about her childhood, her ambitions, her love for travel. Ethan found himself talking about things he hadn't shared in a while. His dreams of fatherhood, his passion for architecture. "Marriage changes people," Vanessa murmured, swirling sake in her glass. "Sometimes for the better. Sometimes it makes you trade ambition for stability." Ethan shifted in his seat, suddenly aware of how easily her words slipped into his thoughts. "It's made me more responsible," he said carefully, "especially with a baby on the way. I want to create a stable life." Vanessa leaned in slightly, her perfume a subtle mix of jasmine and something darker. "That's admirable," she said, "but stability can feel like a cage, can't it?" For the first time, Ethan wasn't sure how to answer. Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Vanessa's words lingered in the air between them, effortlessly slipping into his thoughts like a melody he couldn't ignore. "You have all these ambitions," she murmured, watching him carefully. "And sometimes being a husband, a father, it makes you play it safe. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but doesn't it ever feel like a compromise?" He stiffened, her words stirring something restless inside him. "Olivia supports me. She's always been proud of what I've built." Vanessa smiled, tilting her head slightly. "Of course, I'm sure she does. But I also know the kind of pressure you're under. It's nice to have someone remind you that you're not just a CEO, not just a husband, but a man with his own dreams." The conversation felt like an unspoken dance, each exchange drawing them toward a line Ethan never meant to approach. By the time the dinner ended, it was nearly midnight. Vanessa glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "We should go over the rest of this strategy deck. But only if you're up for it," she said casually. "I have a bottle of wine at my place, or we could go to yours." A sharp pang of warning rang through his mind. He knew exactly what this would look like, knew how easy it would be for someone to see them, to assume the worst. And yet something inside him hesitated. "It's just one drink," he told himself. One final discussion, nothing more. So he nodded. Let's go to my place. We'll keep it quick. The car ride was silent, heavy with something unspoken. When they arrived at the penthouse, Ethan's footsteps echoed against the marble floor, his heart pounding with a conflict he refused to name. Vanessa slipped off her coat, draping it over a chair, revealing a fitted black dress that skimmed her figure. The city lights streamed through the windows, casting a soft glow as he poured them each a drink. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them thickened, tense but unacknowledged. Vanessa finally broke the silence, flipping open her tablet. "Let's go over the campaign," she said, her voice smooth. She patted the couch beside her and he sat, deliberately leaving space between them. At first their conversation was professional, market rollouts, PR strategies, but as the night wore on, her voice softened, her posture leaned in closer. Her hand brushed his arm once, then again. Ethan set down his glass, clearing his throat. "I think we've covered everything," he said, forcing himself to sound detached. "It's late." Vanessa held his gaze, her expression unreadable. But she didn't move. Vanessa didn't move, her gaze locked onto Ethan's with quiet determination. The moment stretched between them, thick with unspoken tension. "It's late," she murmured, tilting her head slightly, "but you're not rushing me out, are you?" Ethan shifted in his seat, forcing himself to look away. "I should," he muttered. She reached out, her fingers brushing over his thigh. A fleeting touch, but deliberate enough to send a jolt through him. "You work so hard," Vanessa whispered. "And you're always so alone here." He stiffened. Every rational thought screamed at him to push her hand away, to remind her that he was married. And yet, something about her audacity, the sheer confidence in the way she toyed with the boundary he had sworn not to cross, held him in place. "You don't ever want to feel free?" she asked, her voice a hushed invitation. A sharp pang of guilt cut through him as Olivia's face flickered in his mind, her laughter, her unwavering trust. She was miles away, resting in the mountains, carrying their child, believing in him. But here, in this dimly lit penthouse, temptation sat inches away, her breath warm against his skin. "It's just a moment," Vanessa murmured, leaning in, her lips hovering near his. "A moment no one has to know about." Ethan's heart pounded. He wasn't sure who moved first, but suddenly their lips met, tentative at first, then urgent. Every warning sign flashed in his mind, but the rush of the moment drowned them out. Vanessa pressed closer, and with every second, the last fragments of resistance crumbled. For all his wealth and discipline, even a millionaire husband wasn't immune to desire. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Vanessa's eyes gleamed with quiet triumph. She slid her arms around his neck, and he didn't stop her. Hours later, as dawn painted streaks of orange across the city skyline, Ethan lay awake, his pulse still racing. Vanessa slept beside him, her silhouette illuminated by the soft light filtering through the windows. Guilt crashed over him, heavy and suffocating. "What have I done?" He slipped out of bed, moving quickly to the bathroom. The mirror reflected a man he barely recognized. The weight of his betrayal settled deep in his chest. Olivia's face filled his thoughts again, her kindness, her love, the life they had built together. Ethan showered, scrubbing his skin as if he could wash away the shame. But when he stepped out, Vanessa was already in the living room, dressed in last night's clothes, casually scrolling through her phone. And the reality of his choices hit even harder. Vanessa scrolled through her phone, a look of quiet satisfaction playing on her lips. When she finally glanced up, her smile was slow and knowing. "Morning," she purred. "I ordered coffee and croissants. Thought we could go over the proposal before heading in." Ethan swallowed hard, forcing himself to remain composed. The weight of last night pressed heavily on his chest, yet his body still betrayed him, recalling the heat of Vanessa's touch. He cleared his throat and gave a curt nod. "Fine, but let's keep this between us." Vanessa's eyes glimmered with amusement. "Of course," she said smoothly. "I have no interest in causing problems for you, but we'll be working closely, Ethan." She let the words settle between them, her meaning unmistakable. "That's what you want, isn't it?" His jaw tightened. Ending this would be the only rational choice. And yet, something held him back. Whether it was guilt or the undeniable pull of temptation, he wasn't sure. "Let's focus on the contract," he said finally, his voice clipped. "That's our priority." She smirked but let him keep his illusion of control. At Caldwell Tech, Ethan buried himself in work, avoiding Jordan's watchful glances and steering clear of Vanessa whenever possible. But the memory of their betrayal lingered, staining every victory. By late afternoon, Jordan approached him, placing a folder on his desk. "Mr. Caldwell," Olivia called. "She wanted to know if you had time to talk tonight." Ethan's chest tightened. He hadn't spoken to her properly in days. "Thanks," he muttered. I'll call her later." Jordan hesitated before speaking again. "Sir?" She sounded worried. Ethan forced a smile. "I'm fine, just busy." That night, he went home alone. Vanessa had suggested a late meeting, but he refused, claiming exhaustion. The truth was, he couldn't face her, couldn't risk giving in again. Instead of sleeping in his bed, he lay on the living room couch, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts tangled with regret. When Olivia called, he answered, forcing his voice to sound normal. But she knew him too well. "Ethan, are you sure everything's all right?" she asked softly. "You feel different." He swallowed, the lie catching in his throat. "Just exhausted," he murmured. "The contract is draining me." On the other end of the line, she sighed, and for the first time, he feared she could see through him, even from miles away. "I'm doing better here," Olivia said, her voice soft yet hopeful. "Clara thinks I might even be able to come home sooner if things keep improving." A jolt of panic shot through Ethan, tightening his grip on the phone. "That's great news," he said, forcing steadiness into his voice. "But don't rush. Your health comes first." When the call ended, his pulse pounded. The thought of Olivia suddenly returning, stepping into their home only to uncover the tangled mess he had created, sent a wave of dread crashing over him. And yet, beneath that fear, there was something else. A reckless thrill, a sense of danger that he couldn't entirely push away. The deception, the risk, it made him feel alive, even as it threatened to tear his world apart. He told himself it had to stop. He would close the deal, cut things off with Vanessa, and somehow beg Olivia's forgiveness. But each silent promise cracked under the weight of temptation. Days blurred into a week. Ethan juggled high-stakes negotiations at Caldwell Tech while navigating the chaos of his personal life. Vanessa continued her quiet seduction, finding excuses to visit the penthouse, always under the guise of work. He tried to resist, to push her away. But every stolen moment, every late-night encounter, only pulled him deeper into a web of lies. Guilt gnawed at him, manifesting in restless nights and phone calls with Olivia, who unknowingly battled her own uncertainties miles away. Meanwhile, whispers had begun circulating in the office. Jordan overheard quiet conversations, mentions of private dinners, hushed speculation about Vanessa leaving Ethan's building in the early hours of the morning. No one had proof, but the rumors swirled. Concerned, Jordan knocked on Ethan's office door one evening. "I don't mean to intrude, sir," he said carefully, "but people are talking. It's the kind of speculation that could hurt both your reputation and the company." Ethan exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "I appreciate the warning," he muttered. "I'll handle it." "Handle it before it spirals," Jordan pressed. "And if you need advice, maybe talk to someone you trust." Ethan nodded briskly, not daring to meet his assistant's gaze. But who could he trust with a secret this destructive? Certainly not Olivia, who remained blissfully unaware. And certainly not Vanessa, who had no intention of letting him go. Ethan felt more isolated than ever, trapped between longing and guilt. He had no one to confide in, not Jordan, not his business partners, and certainly not Olivia. The weight of his choices pressed down on him like an iron chain, tightening with every passing day. That evening, as heavy rain blanketed Los Angeles, Ethan returned to his penthouse, determined to shut himself away from the world, and from her. But as soon as he stepped inside, he saw Vanessa, lounging in the dimly lit living room, a glass of red wine in hand. His pulse kicked up. "Who let you in?" he asked, his voice harsher than he intended. She smirked, feigning innocence. "Your doorman recognizes me. I told him we had urgent campaign details to finalize." Frustration flared, but before he could respond, she rose from the couch, crossing the room with unshaken confidence. "Are you going to throw me out?" she asked softly, fingers trailing along the lapel of his jacket. "Or are you glad to see me?" A thunderclap echoed through the city, mirroring the storm inside Ethan's mind. "This is getting out of hand," he muttered, stepping back. "People at the office are talking. Olivia." Vanessa pressed a single finger to his lips. Don't talk about her right now, she whispered, tilting her head. Her perfume surrounded him, intoxicating, inescapable. I know it's dangerous, but isn't that what makes it thrilling? He should have pushed her away. He should have walked out. But then she kissed him, and every last thread of logic unraveled. Outside, the storm raged, wind howling against the glass, but inside, another storm took hold, a reckless, consuming force neither of them could resist. Lightning illuminated the room in sharp flashes, momentarily exposing the torment carved into Ethan's expression. But he still didn't stop. Hours later, as the rain slowed, Ethan stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his reflection staring back at him. A man he barely recognized. "This has to end," he murmured, more to himself than to her. Vanessa, slipping on her coat, strolled up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "It doesn't have to be forever," she purred. "But while it lasts, let's not deny ourselves." Her words chilled him. Because deep down, he knew the longer he stayed in this tangled mess, the harder it would be to escape. And somewhere across the country, unaware of the destruction waiting for her, his pregnant wife was getting ready to come home. Aspen had been a sanctuary of crisp mountain air and quiet serenity. But Olivia's heart remained restless. The further she progressed into her third trimester, the stronger her longing to return home. She was the wife of a millionaire husband, yet all the luxury in the world couldn't quiet the unease creeping into her chest. Despite Clara's reassurances that she was in excellent health, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. One afternoon, they sat on the terrace of Clara's private retreat, wrapped in blankets against the cool autumn breeze. Olivia held a mug of chamomile tea, staring at the snow-dusted peaks before finally voicing what had been weighing on her. "I think I need to go back," she said, her voice steady but uncertain. "Ethan keeps telling me he's just busy, but I can hear something in his voice. Tension. Distance. He's not himself." Clara studied her carefully. "Your health is good, and the baby's fine," she said gently. "If you feel like it's time to go home, maybe that's your intuition guiding you." Olivia nodded, her fingers tightening around the mug. "I don't want to overthink things, but Ethan always shares everything with me, especially about big deals. Now I get rushed calls, short messages, and excuses." Clara sighed. "Men handle stress differently, but you've always had good instincts. If something feels off, maybe it's time to trust that feeling." Later that evening, Olivia called Ethan, determined to listen beyond his words. The phone rang several times before he finally picked up, his voice slightly breathless. "Liv? Hey. Sorry, I can't talk long. I'm in the middle of something." She frowned, gripping the phone tighter. "I just wanted to let you know I'm coming home next week. The doctor says I'm good to travel, and Clara agrees I don't need to stay any longer." A beat of silence. Then his voice wavered slightly. "That's sooner than we planned. Are you sure? Maybe you should enjoy the rest." Her heart pounded. "I've rested enough. I miss you, Ethan. I want to be with you before the baby comes. Is that a problem?" He forced a laugh, but it sounded hollow. "Of course not. It's just, this contract is at a critical stage. I'll be swamped. I won't have much time for—" Olivia closed her eyes. His words were reasonable, but his tone felt like a lie. "I understand," she said quietly. "Still, I'd rather be near you, even if you're busy." They ended the call without warmth, and as she set down her phone, Olivia knew. Something was very, very wrong. Olivia booked her flight, packed her bags, and embraced Clara tightly before stepping into the waiting car. As Clara walked her to the curb, she pressed a small slip of paper into Olivia's hand. "This is my number. If things get complicated, call me, and I'll be on the next flight out," she said, her tone serious. Olivia managed to smile, though a knot of unease twisted in her stomach. "Thank you, Clara. I hope I'm just overthinking." Yet as the car pulled away toward the airport, she couldn't shake the whisper of doubt that had been gnawing at her for weeks. Something had changed. Meanwhile, across the country, Ethan tossed restlessly in bed, caught between two worlds. Olivia's warmth, her laughter, it all clashed in his mind with the intoxicating thrill of Vanessa's touch. He had spent years constructing a life of order and control, but now the foundation was cracking beneath him. And he knew, without question, that Olivia's early return would shatter it completely. As the sun dipped below the Los Angeles skyline, Olivia's plane touched down at LAX. Her heart pounded with anticipation and dread. The baby kicked softly, as if sensing her unease. She exhaled slowly, rubbing her stomach. "We'll be okay," she murmured. "I just need to see Ethan. We'll figure this out." She had chosen not to tell him the exact time of her arrival, imagining the moment she walked in, how he'd turn, stunned, then break into a relieved smile before pulling her into his arms. That comforting image carried her through baggage claim and the quiet drive home. But when she stepped into the penthouse, reality struck hard. Silence. No welcoming hug, no note. Not even a sign that he had been expecting her. The only sound was the low hum of the air conditioning. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag as she pulled out her phone and dialed his number. No answer. Leaving her luggage near the door, Olivia wandered through the space that suddenly felt foreign. In the master bedroom, small details stood out. An extra pillow slightly out of place, the comforter shifted as though someone had been there not long ago, and then the faintest trace of perfume. Her breath caught. It wasn't hers. It wasn't anything she recognized. Her mind scrambled for an explanation. A guest? A visiting colleague? Maybe even Jordan's wife? Dropping something off? But deep down, she already knew. Olivia tried to push the unease aside as she scrolled through her messages. One from Ethan sent earlier that day mentioned another late meeting with city officials. Maybe he's still at the office, she told herself. Exhausted but restless, she decided to find out for herself. She wanted to see his face the moment he realized she was back. 30 minutes later, she stepped into the sleek, glass-lined lobby of Caldwell Tech. The security guard at the front desk straightened at the sight of her. "Mrs. Caldwell, we weren't expecting you. Should I let Mr. Caldwell know you're here?" She forced a smile. "That's all right, Mark. I'd like to surprise him. Is he still upstairs?" A flicker of hesitation crossed the guard's face. He was, but he left about 20 minutes ago with Miss Hart. Her smile faltered. "Miss Hart?" "Yes, Vanessa Hart. She's a branding consultant, been working closely with Mr. Caldwell on the new city contract." A strange hush settled over Olivia. "Together? Did they say where they were going?" The guard shrugged. "Some restaurant, I think. They seemed in a hurry." Olivia nodded stiffly, murmuring her thanks before stepping away, her heart pounding. She had never heard of Vanessa Hart before. Why would Ethan be at dinner this late with a branding consultant? And so often that even the security guard knew her by name. Her phone vibrated with a message from Clara. Just a casual check-in. She ignored it, too focused on the thoughts racing through her mind. Something was wrong. Determined, she pulled up Ethan's last message. Based on the location, he was likely at a high-end restaurant near the City Hall district. She hailed a cab, her adrenaline surging. Her mind swirled with worst-case scenarios, but she clung to hope. Ethan wouldn't betray me. Not now. Not when they were about to have a child. Yet the faint memory of that unfamiliar perfume still lingered, and the security guard's casual remark stung like a warning. She didn't know it yet, but the truth waiting for her that night would confirm her worst fears. As the cab pulled up to the restaurant, golden light spilled from its windows, illuminating the polished sidewalks. Olivia stepped out, her pulse racing. She scanned the entrance, searching for Ethan's familiar silhouette, her nerves tightening with each passing second. And then she saw him. Through the window, Olivia spotted him. Ethan sat at a corner table, his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable. Across from him, a striking woman leaned in close, smiling in a way that sent a wave of nausea rolling through Olivia's stomach. She didn't need an introduction to know this was Vanessa Hart. This wasn't business. It was something else, something far more dangerous. Summoning her courage, Olivia stepped through the restaurant's glass doors. The hostess barely had time to greet her before she moved past, her eyes locked on that corner table. The moment she reached them, Ethan turned. His expression froze in shock. "Olivia?" he breathed, half rising from his seat. "What are you? You're back?" Vanessa looked up with a slow, assessing blink. She didn't move, didn't flinch. If anything, Olivia sensed the quiet, calculated confidence in her, like a panther sizing up another predator. Olivia forced a tight smile. "Yes, I'm back. I wanted to surprise you." Her gaze shifted to Vanessa. "Though it seems I'm the one who's surprised." Ethan fumbled for words. "Vanessa and we were just discussing branding strategies." Vanessa extended a manicured hand, her voice smooth and controlled. "Vanessa Hart." branding consultant. It's nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Caldwell. Olivia ignored the handshake. I stopped by the penthouse, she continued, turning her focus back to Ethan. You weren't there, Mark. The security guard said you left with Miss Hart. Ethan swallowed hard, his face losing color. Yes, we were just finalizing some last-minute details on the city contract, Olivia. I can explain. Vanessa rose gracefully, brushing an invisible crumb from her dress. I'll give you two a moment, she said, grabbing her purse. Before walking away, she flashed Ethan a knowing, unreadable smile. I'll see you tomorrow, Ethan. We still have a few points to go over. Olivia stood stiffly, resisting the urge to lash out. Not here. Not in front of strangers. Ethan stepped closer, his voice low, filled with panic. Liv? I should have told you we had a working dinner. Why didn't you tell me you were coming home early? She let out a hollow laugh, her hands trembling. I wanted to surprise you, she whispered, her voice breaking. But clearly I'm the one who's blindsided. Ethan glanced around, painfully aware of the curious gazes from nearby tables. Let's not do this here. Let's go home and talk. The word home sent fresh anger surging through Olivia. Home. The place that smelled of another woman's perfume. She forced her voice steady. Fine, but I want the truth. The ride home was thick with silence, both of them staring out the window, lost in their own storms. When they reached the penthouse, Olivia stepped inside first, flipping on every light as if to expose every hidden truth. She turned to Ethan, arms crossed over her growing belly, her pulse pounding. Who is Vanessa Hart to you, really? Her voice was sharp, unwavering. And don't lie to me, Ethan. I know something isn't right. Ethan's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth to speak, then hesitated before trying again. She's been helping with the campaign. We got close, too close. But it was just stress, Olivia. It meant nothing. Her heart twisted painfully. So you're telling me you betrayed me over nothing? Ethan exhaled, running a hand down his face. I never meant for it to happen. It got out of control. I swear to you it was a mistake. I'm so sorry. A sob built in Olivia's throat, but she swallowed it down, refusing to break in front of him. Her eyes flicked toward the bedroom, the place they had built their life together. But now, all she could think about was the unfamiliar perfume that had clung to the sheets, the small shifts in the space she had once considered sacred. Her voice dropped, thick with devastation. It wasn't just once, was it? Ethan flinched, shame tightening his shoulders. No. His voice was hoarse. She's been here, while you were gone. The final confirmation shattered something inside her. She pressed a protective hand over her belly, the full weight of his betrayal sinking in. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This wasn't something she could forgive. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but beneath them, something stronger took hold. A quiet, burning resolve. Pack a bag, Ethan, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I can't even look at you right now. You need to leave. He stepped toward her, desperation in his eyes. Olivia, please. I can fix this. She shook her head, stepping back. Not tonight. Not here. Just go. Ethan swallowed hard, his own eyes glassy with regret. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the bedroom. As she sank onto the couch, every breath, she had come home expecting warmth, love, a celebration of the life they had created together. Instead, her world had shattered in the hands of the man she had trusted most. For the first time in their marriage, her millionaire husband packed a bag, without knowing where he would go. The doorman gave Ethan a polite but puzzled glance as he stepped out of the building just after midnight, an overnight bag slung over his shoulder. Guilt pressed against his chest like a crushing weight. He had no plan, no destination, only the unbearable knowledge that he had destroyed the life he had built. After wandering aimlessly for blocks, he checked into a high-end hotel, reserving a suite under his name alone. His fingers hovered over his phone. He ached to call Olivia, to beg for a second chance, or even Vanessa, to escape the crushing reality of his mistake. But deep down, he knew, any move he made now would only make things worse. Meanwhile, Olivia sat in the penthouse, staring at the city skyline, her tears long since dried, replaced by simmering fury. She paced the living room, occasionally pressing a hand to her belly, grounding herself in the tiny life growing inside her. You have to be strong. For the baby. For yourself. Clara's words echoed in her mind. If things get complicated, call me. But no phone call could erase what Ethan had done. By morning, she finally gave in, dialing Clara's number with trembling hands. The moment her friend heard her voice, Clara didn't hesitate. "I'm coming to you," she said firmly, relief mixed with heartbreak. "I need someone here," Olivia whispered. "I can't face this alone." That same morning, Vanessa strolled into Caldwell Tech as if nothing had happened. She made her way toward Ethan's office, only to be met with a cold stare from Jordan, his assistant. "Mr. Caldwell isn't in," Jordan said sharply, "and I doubt he's interested in visitors." Vanessa arched a brow, feigning innocence. "He has urgent business with me." Jordan rose from her chair, arms crossed. "I think we both know you've done enough damage. If you're smart, you'll stay away." A flicker of irritation crossed Vanessa's face, but she said nothing more. She turned and walked away, acutely aware of the lingering stares from employees who had clearly heard the rumors. Elsewhere, Ethan sat in his hotel suite, staring blankly at his phone as notifications piled up. Calls from the office, board members, even his lawyer, all of them wanting updates on the city contract. But none of it mattered. His entire life had unraveled in a matter of hours. That afternoon, Clara arrived at the penthouse, letting herself in with the spare key Olivia had left at the front desk. She found her friend curled up on the couch, pale and exhausted. Without hesitation, Clara wrapped her arms around Olivia, holding her as silent tears fell. "You need to take care of yourself and the baby first," she murmured. "Ethan can't take that from you." Olivia nodded, letting Clara help her stand. They prepared a simple lunch, though Olivia barely touched her food. Her thoughts remained tangled in the wreckage of her marriage. Between broken sentences and trembling hands, she recounted Ethan's betrayal, and Clara listened intently. "I feel so humiliated," Olivia whispered. "How could he do this now, of all times? I was away trying to be healthy for our child." Clara's expression darkened. "There's no excuse," she said firmly. "But the question is, what do you want? Do you want him gone for good, or do you think there's anything left to salvage?" Tears welled in Olivia's eyes as memories flooded her mind. Their wedding day, Ethan's vows, the love that once felt unshakable. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice breaking. "All I know is, I can't look at him without thinking of her." As Clara led her to the bedroom to rest, Olivia struggled with the questions tormenting her. Could she raise a child in a marriage fractured by betrayal? Could she ever trust him again? The foundation of their life had crumbled, and she was left to decide whether to rebuild or walk away entirely. Across the city, in a luxury hotel suite, Ethan stared at his reflection, tormented by the realization that his reckless choices had cost him everything: his wife, his child, his entire future. Apologies wouldn't be enough to repair the damage, if it could even be repaired at all. For days, Olivia remained secluded in the penthouse under Clara's care. She kept communication with Ethan minimal, needing space to breathe, to think. Clara shielded her from his calls and visitors, ensuring her stress stayed low for the baby's sake. Then, the tabloids got hold of the story. An anonymous source leaked that Ethan Caldwell, a powerful executive, had taken a sudden leave of absence from Caldwell Tech following a rumored affair. Social media buzzed with speculation, though neither Ethan nor the company made a public statement. Vanessa, for her part, bombarded Ethan with texts, some apologetic, others defensive. He ignored them all, drowning in shame and desperation. When he finally gathered the courage to call Olivia, Clara answered coldly, "She's not ready to speak with you." Ethan visited a lawyer, searching for damage control strategies, both personal and professional. The lawyer advised him to consider a public apology if the rumors worsened, but emphasized that his priority should be private reconciliation. Meanwhile, the city contract negotiations stalled. Officials hesitated to proceed, wary of the scandal looming over his name. On the fifth day, Olivia agreed to let Ethan visit the penthouse under Clara's watchful eye. He arrived clutching a bouquet of her favorite roses, but as he stepped inside, he knew no amount of flowers could erase the gravity of his betrayal. Clara opened the door, her expression unreadable as she stepped aside to let Ethan in. He hesitated for a second before entering, his gaze immediately finding Olivia in the living room. She sat with her arms folded over her growing belly, exhaustion evident in her features. Her eyes were red-rimmed, yet beneath the pain, a quiet determination lingered. "I'm here to talk," Ethan said, his voice unsteady. "To apologize." Olivia didn't flinch. "Don't say anything unless you mean it," she said quietly. "Because I don't need empty words. I need to know why, and I need to know if there's any chance I can trust you again." Ethan set the bouquet of roses aside and sank to his knees in front of her. He told her everything. How he had felt lonely, overwhelmed, and lost without her. How Vanessa's relentless charm and their late-night meetings had chipped away at his self-control. How he had convinced himself it was nothing until it was too late. Olivia listened in silence, tears slipping down her cheeks. When he finished, her voice was raw. "You destroyed my faith in you at the worst possible time," she whispered. "How could you risk everything we built for something so meaningless?" Ethan bowed his head, his own eyes glassy with regret. "I can't defend it," he admitted. "I was selfish, weak, and I hate myself for it. But I swear to you, it will never happen again. I love you, Olivia, and I love our child more than anything." The silence between them stretched, broken only by the distant hum of the city outside. Finally, Olivia inhaled shakily. "If we have any future at all, you need to cut all ties with Vanessa. Completely. No contact, no business, no excuses. And I want it in writing." Ethan nodded without hesitation. "Done. I'll have my lawyer draft an agreement, and if you need time before we live together again, I'll respect that." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, and she hated how much his desperation tugged at her heart. She wasn't sure if love was enough. She wasn't sure if she could ever look at him without remembering the betrayal. "This won't be forgiven easily," she murmured. "I don't know if I can move past it, but for our child's sake, I might try." Relief and sorrow warred across Ethan's face. He reached for her hand, and this time, she let him hold it, tentatively, as if testing whether there was still anything left to salvage. Clara stood nearby, quietly watching the moment unfold. Olivia realized then that her journey was far from over. Her millionaire husband had shattered her trust, and the wounds would not heal overnight. Yet as Olivia sat in the quiet of the penthouse, her hands resting on her growing belly, she realized the future she had once dreamed of with Ethan was no longer certain. Trust, once broken, was not easily rebuilt. It would take time, commitment, and honesty, if it could be salvaged at all. Would she ever be able to look at him without remembering the betrayal? Or was it time to forge a new path, one where she and her child stood strong on their own? Only time would reveal the answer. 3 years later, the evening air was crisp, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine as Olivia stood on the penthouse balcony, looking out over the New York skyline. The city was alive, shimmering beneath the dark velvet sky, yet a quiet peace settled over her. She rested a hand on the small fingers curled. "Look, Mommy, lights." The little boy's voice was filled with wonder, his dark eyes mirroring the brilliance of the city below. She smiled, brushing a hand through his soft curls. "Yes, sweetheart. It's beautiful, isn't it?" It had been 3 years since that night, since the world she thought she knew had shattered. 3 years since she had given Ethan an ultimatum. The road to this moment had not been easy. Ethan had left that night without protest. He hadn't begged, hadn't argued, just nodded, the weight of his mistakes pressing down on him. The next morning, he had cut ties with Vanessa completely, sending her an ironclad contract severing all professional and personal connections. But words and documents meant nothing if actions didn't follow. The first year was the hardest. Olivia had needed time. Time to grieve the life she thought she had. Time to understand if she could ever trust again. Ethan, once a successful businessman with an empire to run, had willingly stepped away from his company for 6 months, dedicating himself solely to proving his worth to his wife and unborn child. He started from the ground up, not with grand gestures but with the little things, attending doctor's appointments, decorating the nursery, staying up late to read parenting books. He moved into a separate apartment nearby, never pushing, never demanding. Olivia saw the change, but the wounds ran deep. Their son, Liam, was born on a rainy autumn morning, and when Ethan held him for the first time, tears filled his eyes. "I will never let you down," he had whispered, pressing a kiss to his tiny forehead. The second year brought slow, cautious steps forward. Olivia let Ethan move back into the penthouse, but their marriage was rebuilt piece by piece. There were hard days, painful conversations, nights where old fears crept in, but there was also laughter, quiet moments of understanding, and love rekindled in the smallest of ways. morning coffee waiting for her, gentle touches when words weren't enough. Now, 3 years later, Olivia watched their son lean into Ethan's arms as he stepped onto the balcony, wrapping them both in his warmth. "Daddy, look at the lights!" Liam giggled, pointing excitedly. Ethan pressed a kiss to Olivia's temple, his voice full of awe. "I look at them every night, and I still think the most beautiful sight in the world is right here." She turned, meeting his gaze, the same gaze she had fallen in love with so many years ago. There was no more hesitation, no more doubt. The past would always be a part of them, but it no longer defined them. "I forgive you," she whispered. And in those 3 words, every battle, every tear, and every moment of healing finally made sense. Life isn't a fairy tale. Love is not just about passion and romance, it's about choices. It's about choosing to fight for something, even when it's broken. It's about patience, honesty, and a willingness to change. Olivia's story is not just one of heartbreak, it's one of strength. She didn't forgive Ethan overnight. She didn't let love blind her to betrayal. Instead, she set boundaries, demanded respect, and only when she saw true change did she open her heart again. And Ethan, he proved that regret alone is not enough. True redemption requires action, sacrifice, and an understanding that trust is not given, it's earned. To anyone who has ever been hurt, betrayed, or left questioning whether love is worth fighting for, your worth is not defined by someone else's mistakes. You have the power to decide your own future. Whether you choose to forgive or to walk away, make sure it's a choice that honors your strength and self-respect. Where do we go from here? If this story moved you, if you felt Olivia's pain, Ethan's regret, and the slow, bittersweet journey of rebuilding something fragile, then we invite you to stay with us. Stories like this remind us that life is complex, but love, when fought for the right way, can be incredibly powerful. Comment below. What would you have done in Olivia's shoes? Would you have forgiven Ethan, or would you have walked away? Let's talk about it. Subscribe for more stories of love, betrayal, and redemption. Because sometimes the best endings aren't perfect. They're simply real. Thank you for being part of this journey. See you in the next story.